All right, let's begin with a big story. No matter the rising expenses, the desire to raise a child is priceless. And this is one thing that most parents don't scrimp over to the extent that they can afford. Year after year, parents are anxious if they're well prepared to support their child's growth, be it in education or health. As per a survey done by the Economic Times, the overall expenditure of schooling a child in India in a private school from age 3 to 17 is a whopping 30 lakh rupees, while the price of government schooling will of course be much lesser at around 15 to 20,000 rupees per annum. On the other hand, college education expenses are also expected to rise 10% every year, with the cumulative expenditure standing at an estimated 1 crore rupees. Now, this survey in a sense tells us something we all instinctively know, that education is expensive, is getting even more expensive. But is it really worth it? And do parents have enough of an option? To speak more on this, I am joined today by Dr. Urvashi Sahni, founding president and chief executive of Study Hall Educational Foundation. And I'm also speaking today with Dr. Jyoti Gupta, principal of KR Mangalam School. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us on the India Development Debate today. Dr. Sahni, I just want to get your take now on these figures, and it's really astonishing, to be honest. 30 lakh rupees for school education till the age of 17, after which you're unlikely to be employable for anything.
So, thank you, Tamanna, and thank you for having me. Let me, first talk about that article. I read it, and I'm a little surprised that when we talk of private schools in India, I'm sure he was aware that there are private schools and there are private schools. There's a very wide range of private schools, by the way. And he's talking about perhaps the top 2 or 3% or 5% of private schools in the whole country. Right now, 40% of our population goes to private schools, and 25% of our schools are private schools. But the majority of those private schools charge under 20,000 a year, right? So the figures that he's given are for very, they are for elite schools. For example, we run a bunch of schools, my foundation. And one of our schools, the figure is about right. It's about, still it's not that much, 91,000 a year. So it's about 15 to 16 lakhs from pre-K to class 12. But then there's an affordable school, which is only 5 lakhs 40,000 for the same duration. And there's another one, which is 1.5, which is a rural school. And this about captures the range that I'm talking about. So I think when you're thinking about what it costs an Indian child to go to school, we must be careful about which India we're talking about, and even private schools. We should be careful about which private school we are talking about. Yes, 30 lakhs is astronomical.
But Dr. Sahni, may I just come in with that point? Children give their parents the best they can possibly afford. And in these ranges of private schools that you're speaking about, is the quality of education the same? It's the principal question on why should it cost so much?
Exactly. One, it isn't the same. In fact, but at the same time, I don't know that the very high-end schools and the lower to high-end schools, let's say there's that much difference. Yes, it should not cost that much. And I would actually fault even the government. Look at Singapore, look at China. They have invested in their public school education so that almost everybody can afford a decent education, right? In countries like the US as well, and Norway, Finland, all the more developed countries, they have invested in their public school system so that most of the people, the bigger chunk of the middle class and above, and all classes, they go to these schools, they have a decent chance of employability, and it's only the very, maybe 1% elite that goes to the very expensive schools, where they're even more expensive than the numbers you're quoting in India, right? I think our country needs to focus on that. So in the one case, this article is very illuminating. Again, I would fault it for being so limited. It should have painted a broader canvas. It should have spoken about the context. It's a wake-up call. Hey, listen, if it costs so much, one young couple just said, that's why we don't have children, because afford this, right? So my point is that what is the government doing about that? That is one. Secondly, even private schools, I think commercializing education and health are really sins. You shouldn't do that. You should charge what it costs. right? And good education does cost money. At the same time, does it justify these astronomical costs? I'm not so sure. And as an educator who has been running schools for the last 36 years now, I think you can give a pretty decent education. And again, what about cross subsidy? In the same school, you can.
All right, we're losing your line there. We'll try and fix it, Dr. Urvashi, to just get a better idea of what you're saying. Let me turn to Dr. Jyoti Gupta. Meanwhile, on this issue, I want to understand why there is such an escalation and inflationary pressure on fees year on year. And if you look through that survey in detail, there is also a lot of pain in extras apart from tuition fees, costs of bus, uniforms, books. All of this makes it difficult. I mean, Dr. Urvashi is talking about people who don't want to have children. There are some people who say they can't afford more than one or two because how will they educate them? Should this be seen as a very serious issue, Dr. Gupta?
So before I answer your question, I would like to say one thing on record. There is nothing known as free education anywhere. Today, even if the government schools are teaching the children and the direct beneficiary is not paying directly for the fee or the education that they are getting, there is someone else who's paying for that fee. So there are taxpayers whose money is being utilized by the states in order to educate the children in the public schools or in the government schools. The teachers there get more salary than the teachers get in the private schools. There are a lot of expenditures that are done in the government schools, whether it is in terms of uniforms, it's in terms of the midday meals, it is in the terms of books, stationery, everything that is given to the children. So somebody is paying for it. It is not free education. Maybe the people who are direct beneficiaries are not paying for it. And year after year, we see that the state governments are increasing their budget that they are wanting to spend on education. So if they are increasing their budgets, why will these schools, which are independent schools, which are running only on their own fee, not increase the fee year after year? Every year you need to give an increment to the teachers. There is a 3% of mandated increment that needs to be given to all the teachers. Then there are DA increases that come every year. So that needs to be paid to the teachers as well. So obviously there is nothing else that the schools are doing apart from getting the fee from the children and educating the children. They are self-sustaining. The land on which the private schools are built are private lands which are coming from the promoters, or they are being, given the loans by the banks, which have to be returned back. So there is money involved there. Where it comes about, increasing the fee apart from the tuition fee, if you're increasing the exam fee, there is stationery that comes along with it. Where was the paper cost 2 years back and where is it today? With the diesel
Dr. Gupta, I'm not making a case.
higher.
I'm not making a case to, not charge what it costs or a
So
case
that's what
against
I'm
private
saying.
schools.
Let me just complete.
Yes.
Let me just complete. Even CBSE says that the fee of the school should commensurate with the facilities that are given by the school. There are schools which run in 10 acres. There are schools which run in 1 acre. There are schools which run in 1.5 acre also. Obviously, the cost of maintaining the infrastructure, the cost of maintaining the play fields, the cost of maintaining everything is added on to the fee. So you just asked Dr. Sahni that is is every school giving a similar kind of an education? Is the quality the same? Well, I would say that everybody in their own capacity and in their own competency and in the fee that they are charging, they are trying to give all the facilities to the children. Of
Yes.
course, some parts
Let
are
me come in,
mandated.
ma'am, because I think we need to. I need to set the tone of this conversation. This is not a why do private schools charge so much and they shouldn't be. It is about, do ordinary Indian children deserve this quality of education as a basic right or not? And then how do we make that happen? That really is the question. Yes, Dr.
May I
Sahni.
respond?
Yeah.
Okay. One, Jyoti, I don't think the government is spending enough, by the way. They should be spending much more. Developed countries are spending a much larger chunk of their budget. India is very measly and way far behind in that. One. Secondly, the government should up the quality of their schools, and that is one solution. Everybody cannot afford these. And thirdly, of course, taxpayer money should be spent on education. What else is it for? It should be spent on essential services for health and education. And we should be able to avail of it. My children should be able to go to a good government school, because my granddaughter lives in New York and the parents do well, they're earning, but the child has been going to a government school because it's very high quality. So I think the answer to all of this, and no denying that, of course, private schools have to make, they have to cover their costs, and so they charge what they do. At the same time, you will agree that there are many schools that are charging way beyond, because they are profit driven. People have figured that education is good business, and they are charging money because they are trying to earn profits. That, I think, is totally unforgivable. But most importantly, in any developed country, anywhere where all the citizens have a shot at a good, decent education, which makes them employable, which helps achieves personal flourishing, allows them to thrive. The government has invested very strongly, and private schools are normally either, schools, religious-driven schools, or they are very high elite private schools. And there's a very small percentage of the population that avails of them. If you look at Finland, which is number one, by the way, in education over the world, okay? It's the government school system that drives it. Look at Singapore. It is the government school system that's driving it. There's a very, very small belief. What about India? 40% of our population, and I tell you, in 1992, it was only 13%. It has grown because people have lost the quality of government.
All right, Dr. Gupta wants to respond. Dr. Gupta wants to respond. Let's listen to her, please. Yes, Dr. Gupta.
Yeah, it's not fair to compare a country like India, which has such large population, with either Finland or Singapore. It's just not possible. There are some Indian government systems
China.
which are very good.
Even China has, by the way, done better than us.
One minute, ma'am.
Let's look at the
Please, one by one. Yes.
Let's look at the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas. I mean, they are doing exceedingly well. They also beat some of the private schools. So we can't say that the government is not doing their bit. Some of these state government schools are doing very well. Look at even some schools in Delhi. I mean, look at the schools of excellence that have been set up. Look at the Pratibha Vikas Vidyalaya that is there in Delhi. Similarly, there are other schools, aided schools in UP, which are doing very well.
Enough.
There are schools in Pune that do very well.
So are you saying it's the parents? 1 minute. Are you saying it's the parents who aspire to schools which will get their children to maybe speak more fluently in English, network better, teach them social skills better, and all of this has also fueled this?
I can tell you about UP, like most people want to send their children to private schools. They do not want to send their children to the government schools. Even if a private school is charging them, let us say, 1,000 rupees per month, they would still not send the children to the government school. They will send them to the private school. Now, here the debate comes that a school that is charging only 1,000 rupees cannot deliver the quality, cannot hire the teachers who are qualified enough. In that case, it is better to go to a government school, at least be taught by the teachers who are hired by the government, because all teachers who are hired by the government or by the state governments are at least qualified. A private school will still hire a teacher who is probably doing the B.Ed or who has not done the B.Ed, but a government system will never hire such a teacher. So the question is that these small schools that are there, which are charging such low fee, should they be there in order to, deliver the education, which is, really not quality driven? Because there was also a survey a few years back which said that a private school, which is a CBSE school, cannot have a fee less than 4,800 rupees. So any school which is charging lesser fee than that cannot obviously pay to the teachers, cannot obviously give out the facilities.
Right.
Now, today with the new national education policy, we are talking about experiential learning. We are talking about learning spaces. We are talking about art. We are talking about art integration, sports
My
integration.
simple
So
point,
where
ma'am.
does it come from?
No, things cost. Things cost. There's no doubt about it. My simple point is that should only children from privileged families be, able to get such facilities and such education, point one.
Exactly,
And point two,
exactly, Tamanna.
should parents,
So that's my-
put such a large proportion of their incomes then towards education? I've actually
Look
run
at
out
the
of time.
government schools.
But Dr.
Look at
Sahni,
the
just
state
quick
of
response on
Tamanna,
this.
may I?
Yes.
The point is, I think your question is absolutely very valid, that everyone should have a shot. And that is why we need to think of all the children of India. And by the way, China has a population which is still a little more than ours, and it has done very well because the government has made that a priority. And I think our country must make it a priority. And unless it does that, we are headed for disaster. Because 4% of our population is choosing private. Out of that, majority are in these affordable schools.
All
where
right.
the is not very good. So
Private school need
choice.
not be better quality school. That's also an important point to
Exactly,
note. All right, thank
exactly.
you so much. I must end it here, but I want to thank Dr. Sahni and Dr. Gupta for joining us in this, I would say, riveting debate on a very, very important issue. But let me move on to the other big